Hello there, and welcome to Cool Talk Talks and the series, The 100 Most Influential People in History, as per author Michael Hart. And today we'll discuss the impact of number 3, Jesus. Number 3, you might say. Why not number 1? Well, I agree with you. Michael Hart placed Jesus behind number 1 and 2. His choices for number 1 and 2 were Muhammad, founder of Islam, and Isaac Newton. Now, I already made videos on Muhammad and Isaac Newton, and you can check them out. And you'll see his reasons as to why Muhammad was placed at number 1. Now, I'm going to elaborate on Michael Hart's reasons for not placing Jesus on top, and then I'm going to add my observations. Now, keep in mind a couple of things. For those who believe that we don't know if Jesus ever existed, I'm not going to use this video to dispute that. Suffice to say that most scholars accept the existence of a historical Jesus. Also, I'm not including theology or beliefs in this video. There will be no talk of miracles or the resurrection or any statements of his being the Son of God. I'm going to approach this so that even an atheist can appreciate the impact of Jesus. Michael Hart states that when Jesus died, number 1, he left a small Jewish sect behind, and that it was really Paul and other followers who spread Jesus' teachings. Number 2, Michael Hart says that some of the results of the spread of Christianity were things that Jesus would not approve of: the Inquisition, the persecution of the Jews, religious wars, and the Crusades. Number 3, that though many credit the church for the spread of science, it was really after the Renaissance that modern science rose quickly. And to see more of that, look at my video on Isaac Newton. Number 4, that Jesus was not a political leader like Muhammad. He left no writings, and his influence was as an ethical leader. Let me contest some of these followings. It is true that the number of Jesus' followers were relatively small upon his death, and that it was the followers of Jesus who wrote the Gospels, spread the teachings, and propagated the mass numbers of conversions. We have to keep in mind that without a Jesus, there would have been no Paul, no Peter, no James, no John. We would not have 2.4 billion Christians today. 1/3 of the world follows his teachings. It's true that there were negative results coming from Christianity, especially when coupled with the secular world. But though many twisted Jesus' teachings and took his commandment to preach his word as an excuse for conquest, it still counts as an influence, even if negative. We could add to this that a byproduct of the Crusades was an interaction of trade and ideas, inventions between Europe, Middle East, and Asia. It's true that European culture gave way to the scientific way of knowledge, and that it wasn't Christianity, it was Greek rationalism that initiated the path towards modern science. However, we cannot deny that after the Renaissance, the church's role in spreading and building in the areas of science, art, engineering, architecture, and mathematics cannot be denied. Michael Hart further states that if Jesus were the originator of the golden rule, do unto others as you would have done unto you, he would place Jesus at the top of the list. But he says that the golden rule has to be ascribed to Confucius 500 years earlier, and also contends that every major religion accepts the philosophy of the golden rule. All true, but while the idea is not originally Jesus's, his disciples wrote it into the Gospels. Millions of people have read it through the Gospels, and billions of people were affected by it. Other ethical ideas of Jesus? Number 1, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. And number 2, if someone were to strike your right cheek, turn to him the left also. Hart says that these 2 ethical teachings are remarkable. They originated with Jesus, but that we don't normally practice them, that it's an ideal that we aspire to. He calls these teachings an untried suggestion. And that is where Michael Hart ends his chapter. He states why Jesus is not number 1, but he never really speaks as to why Jesus is on the list at all. So let's remedy this. First of all, I disagree that few people follow loving their enemies and turning the other cheek. The reason that there are over 2 billion Christians today is in great part because of the martyrs who did practice this philosophy. People were impressed by those that were persecuted. And then, as a result, they established churches worldwide. And while most of us don't love our enemies, we still look at this as an ideal that we do aspire to better ourselves and to be forgiving, if not loving. The Christian faith is a main proponent of this moral behavior. It is embedded in many societies. And just think, if there was no Jesus, there'd be no Christianity, and therefore no New Testament, and no Christian Bible. So only those who read the Holy Scriptures of Judaism or the Torah would know who Adam and Eve were, or Moses, or Noah, Joseph, David, Solomon. When somebody tells you that so-and-so is a true Christian, it means that that person is an example of the standards established by Jesus. The commandment, heal the sick, feed the hungry, is so ingrained in us that many of us measure the value of our governments by how it takes care of its own. That mercy, justice, charity, and goodwill are qualities for leaders to aim for. Now, slavery had existed for millenniums, and while many Christians practiced slavery, it was mostly Christians that started to abolish it. The abolitionist movements did away with the institution. Jesus' teachings included that women were not property, that married men should be committed to their wives and love them. And yes, the Romans, the Spartans, and other societies upheld the value of women, and yes, Muhammad did the same centuries later. But nevertheless, Jesus was a major propagator of these thoughts. 75% of charitable donations within the United States are motivated by faith. And I would guess that worldwide we would see the same similar pattern. The commandment to go to every corner of the earth to preach was a major proponent for European exploration. Human rights and high principles and duty of care on which many secular laws are founded account for our protection of the innocent and seeks human dignity, not only for those less fortunate, but even for prisoners, those who harm us. Many leaders use Christianity as a weapon to call for war, for crusades, to consolidate power, declaring the divine right of kings. We could go on and on. But what if Jesus had not existed? What would the world be like today? It's hard to say. Inventions would still be made, if only by necessity. Perhaps other new religions could have been created, since we're always seeking so much to understand one another. When Obi-Wan Kenobi in the movie Star Wars told Luke to use the Force, moviegoers knew what he meant. Without Christianity, leaders would have found different reasons for conquests, and using the example of the Native Americans in the Americas, they would have been exploited for natural resources anyway. But it would have been a different kind, or perhaps a different quantity of exploitation, since Christianizing natives would no longer be an excuse. There may have been even a more brutal exploitation of Native Americans, since Queen Isabella, Fray Montesino, Father Bartolomé de las Casas, and many others used Christian teachings to call out for better treatment of the natives. North, South, and Central America is predominantly Catholic today. Their behavior follows such. And while we may look at the Catholic Church and be in awe or perhaps be disgusted by the exhibit of pomp and riches that it has, and these people that say this have a point, but a byproduct often is that a lot of people have to put their money where their mouth is. And they have to reach out and they have to help. There are countless missions going across the globe in order to help the less fortunate. And don't forget the influence of philosopher Augustine, telling us that we were sinful by birth and therefore, placing a lot of guilt in all of us. Martin Luther rebelled against the Catholic Church, and he formed his own teachings where you can have a personal relationship with God the Father and Jesus. And we have millions of evangelicals today. But the main influence of Jesus is basically, yes, ethical. Michael Hart says this, and I do agree. Where do I disagree with Michael Hart? Is in the influence that Jesus has had. I place Jesus on the top of the list, the number one most influential person that ever lived. Well, I hope you found my arguments compelling, perhaps thought-provoking, and maybe even challenging. Let me know in the comments below. And look out for my next video. We're going to be examining who Michael Hart thought was the number 4th person most influential in all of history. Again, let me know your thoughts, send me your likes, or better yet, subscribe. This is Cool Talk Talks.